Area Planning Committee on Thursday, the 23rd of January 2025. For the benefit of the public attending today or watching on the live stream, I'm Councillor Bolwell, Chair of this committee. My Vice Chair is Councillor Isenk. The meeting is being live streamed and will be available to view on the Council website after the meeting. By attending this meeting, you consent to being filmed. Can I remind everyone that when you are speaking, please speak directly into the microphones so that you can be clearly heard and seen. The Planning Committee is not a public meeting, but a meeting to which the public is invited. All attendees must comply with the ruling of the Chair. They must not interrupt the meeting or cause undue disturbance. To support this, please switch off your mobile phones or select silent mode for the duration of the meeting. And those using Teams, please ensure microphones are on mute and your device volume is set to 0 to maintain audio quality. Only those who have registered to speak in accordance with the speaking protocol will be invited to address the committee for a maximum of 3 minutes. That will be limited to the first 3 people objecting to and the first 3 people supporting the application to have registered along with the Parish Council and a ward member. No materials to be circulated to members of the committee. We have 2 applications to determine today. The case officer will be invited to present the report and recommendations. Next, I will invite members of the public who have registered to speak with the Democratic Services Officer before the deadline to address the committee in the following order: public against, public support, applicant, agent, town or parish council, and finally ward members. Each speaker has a maximum of 3 minutes. Following on from the registered public speakers, the planning officers will have the opportunity to address any salient points they wish to clarify, and committee members will be given the opportunity to ask questions of the planning officers before moving on to their debate. When we go into councillor questions and debate, for the benefit of the public watching, can the members state their name and ward when addressing the meeting? Next, I will take a roll call of members present. Myself, Dave Bolwell, Neil Isenk.
Yes.
Good morning, Neil.
Good morning, thank you.
Louise Bown. Good morning, Louise. Simon Christopher. Good morning, Simon. Councillor Paul Kimber. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Paul. Councillor Pete Roper. Good morning, Pete. Councillor David Shortell. Good morning, David. And Councillor Kate Weller. There are apologies. Josh, could you please list the apologies for me? Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, we've had apologies today from Councillors Belinda Borden, Louis O'Leary and David Northam.
Lovely. Thank you, Josh. I will now introduce the officers involved in today's meeting. They include Anne Collins, Development Manager, Area Manager, Phil Crowther, Legal Business Partner, Regulatory, Matthew Pochin-Hawkes, who's our lead project officer on both of these, Susan Hetherington, Engineer, Development Liaison, Josh Kennedy, Democratic Services Officer, and John Miles, Democratic Services Officer. Declarations of interest. Can I ask members if they have any declarations of interest they wish to make? There don't seem to be any declarations of interest. Item 3 on the agenda, to agree and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of December 2024. If everybody has read them, are there any questions or corrections required? No? Okay. In that case, I'll sign them as a true record of the meeting at the end of this meeting. Thank you. Item 4, public participation. Members of the public registered to speak can be given the opportunity to speak now if they wish to, or wait for their item to be presented. I've spoken to the public speakers this morning and I believe they want to speak to their application. So moving on to item 5, planning applications. The first one is P/FUL/2024/05538, which is Weymouth Harbour, Weymouth, DT4 8AJ, and this will be introduced by Matthew Pochin-Hawkes. We do have one speaker, Mr. Espana, which is the project engineer of Dorset Council, which are the applicant in this case. Matthew, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. So this planning application is by Dorset Council. That's why the reason it's been brought to the Planning Committee this morning. It's for the replacement and strengthening of harbour walls F and G through a new sheet piling wall installed in front of those existing walls, all for the development above the mean low watermark, and with tie bar extensions, works of footpaths, open space, and ancillary works. So this is a site. It includes sections of the existing wall here, wall F and wall G, and the footpaths on the south side of that. It includes an open space here and the car park area, which is around the edge of the walls. This is an aerial view of the site. The majority of the site is hard standing, save for some planters around this side of the existing open space, which is north of the Pavilion Theatre building. And yeah, as I said, the planning application relates to works above the mean low watermark. So that's essentially a small part of this section here, and then the existing land. Land below the mean low watermark falls within the jurisdiction of the Marine Management Organisation, for which there's a parallel application for marine licensing works that's currently live and undetermined. So these are the designations and constraints. The site is within the defined development boundary of Weymouth. It's within the Weymouth Town Centre area, and it forms part of policy Way 6, which is a site allocation. That policy, Ferry Peninsula, it's more to do with the kind of the long-term regeneration of this area. It includes the whole of the peninsula here, and it promotes the comprehensive redevelopment of the peninsula for leisure, tourist-related uses, supported by complementary town centre uses and housing, together with the continued operation of the ferry service. Bear in mind, the policy was the local plan was adopted in 2015, and this ferry service has since ceased. Other constraints: a very small part of the site falls within the Weymouth Town Centre conservation area, just clipping the southwest corner of the site there. Nearby heritage assets include the Jurassic Coast World Heritage Site, which is on the other side of the harbour entrance. The Devonshire buildings here, which are the closest asset to the site, they are grade 2-star listed. There's Noath Fort as well on the other side of the harbour, which is a scheduled ancient monument and a grade 2-star listed building. Within the site itself, there are the railings which run along this part of the existing wall and along the west of the esplanade. They're a non-designated heritage asset, and there's also a pleasure pier sign as well, which is also considered a non-designated heritage asset. So the site is affected by flood risk, as you'd expect. What's shown on here is the flood zones 2 and 3 affect part of the site and the immediate surrounding area of the peninsula, and they have medium and high levels of surface water flooding. There are also isolated parts of surface water flooding as well. There is a nearby spot of contaminated land, and there's also a few others across the wider peninsula there. And the southwest coastal pass clips the corner of the site as well. And in terms of ownership, the site is entirely owned by Dorset Council. So just going to take you through some photos now, starting from kind of west to east, walking around the site. Many of you will know the site well, but standing on the esplanade, looking towards the site here, you can see where the site starts is where the beach steps are, just around in this location, and you can see the railings run along here. As you enter the site, the existing wall is low. There's the kind of capping beam here, the concrete capping beam here with the railings above it, and you've got a small section of path as you walk into the site. When you walk further into the site, you've got the existing open space. There's in this space there is a series of benches, some planters, and an anchor. And this photo 4 looks north there. You've got good views across Weymouth Bay, and you can see here the planters that I was talking about. The pleasure pier sign That is a non-designated heritage asset. And this kind of marks the boundary on the site where the wall height steps up from, very low level with railings with open views to about 1 metre, and the height of the wall is around 1 metre for the kind of entirety of the rest of the site. As you get further into the site, this is the kind of northern end of the site. You can see here you've got the height of the wall being around 1 metre, and there's a series of raised platforms here where there's seating provided so that people can sit down and look over those walls. It is cordoned off. The reason why this part is cordoned off is because a sinkhole has developed within the site, and that's because you've got cavities within the walls, which has caused that erosion. These final photos here are from the pleasure pier looking back towards Wall F, and then looking across the harbour. You can appreciate the distance there with Knowth Fort and what is part of the World Heritage Site as well. Just to provide some context, this is a historic aerial view showing the constructions of Wall F and Wall G. It was constructed through piling and backfilling with this section, and with the land being reclaimed from the sea in around 1977. And the wall forms part of a series of flood defences around Weymouth, some of which have been recently upgraded, and for others where there are future plans at different stages of development. So that's Wall F, that's Wall G, and the report also talks about some recent upgrades to Wall D down here, which is along Custom House Quay, where the wall has been fairly recently upgraded. And just to kind of show the condition of the wall, they are in a very poor condition here. This is one of the cavities that has opened up within the wall along that northern section. And what you see here is a diagram from the applicant's engineer, WSP, which kind of shows the how that has led to sinkholes developing. And the future lifespan of these walls is very limited. They are in urgent need of replacement. So onto the proposed plans, proposed development. There are a lot of technical drawings in this application, so I'm just going to focus it in on the landscaping plans and the sections. And here we've got the proposed landscaping plan. What the proposal is for the construction of new sheet piled walls in front of the existing walls. So all the work would be done on the landward side of the development, and the existing walls would be demolished down to ground level with part of the walls being buried below the ground. And it's split into two sections here. The first section is section G, and that runs up to where the pleasure pier sign is. That section would be cantilevered without any kind of lateral supports underground. The remaining section of Wall G and Wall F would be supported by underground tie bars, which would link into the ground. That's a engineering operation which needs planning permission. And then the new land that would be created behind the new walls would be backfilled with new land reclaimed and a footpath cycleway created along that front. So the footpath cycleway would get slightly wider. There is the two open spaces within the site. You've got the existing one here, which would be remodelled slightly, and I'll come on to that. And you've got a new open space here, which is proposed at the kind of northern tip of the site, and that's designed as a raised platform to allow better views over the raised height of the wall, and designed as a kind of picnic area with benches to compensate for the loss of the seating areas along this section of the wall. And the car park would also be rejigged slightly with a slight loss of car parking spaces overall, but again in the number of accessible bays. I'm just going to go through the sections on that drawing, just working from west to east. So starting down by the beach as you enter the site, you can see here in kind of faint grey, that's the existing wall, and what you've got in black is the proposed wall. So there's very little change here between the existing and proposed. There would be railings, but those railings would be new. They'd be more modern than the current white and blue railings, and you'd still get good views over it. The height of the wall here has been amended quite significantly to what was originally submitted. I think when it originally came in, the height of the wall was around 1.2 metres, and officers raised initial concerns with the impact of that on residential amenity and the Grade 2 star listed building, the Devonshire Buildings, which is nearby. So the height of that section has changed. As you progress, so that section A1 on the left there, as you progress round, you can see it's similar to existing. And moving further along there, again, the cap and beam steps up slightly, but it's quite a low level. Views are going to be similar to what's there at the moment, and there'd be railings atop of that wall. Entering the existing public open space by the Pavilion Theatre, again, the design is similar, views be similar across it. What's changed within that space in terms of the landscaping is that rather than having a kind of series of different planters within the site, there'd be one continuous planter along the eastern southern boundary. That's kind of beneficial from a public amenity perspective, because it gives a kind of a barrier to the car park and creates a kind of more open amenity there. It is also important for compensating for the loss of those planters in biodiversity net gain terms. This is a long section through that existing open space, and as you can see what I've talked about there, you've got relocated benches proposed, that planted to the rear, and again, views would remain similar to what they are at the moment, and the anchor that's on that part of the site would be retained. Walking slightly further along, again, you can see the height of the walls would be similar to existing, and views be similar. This is where the height of the wall changes quite significantly from what's there at the moment, and this is needed for flood risk reasons. But after the existing open space, the wall changes from a cantilevered wall to one that's kind of tied back in with these tie bars. And these sections D and E, you can see the quite significant step up in the height of the wall. This goes up from around 1 metre at the moment to 1.75 metres. So it's going to restrict views along there. But I suppose importantly, that's the section which people would, you'd walk along there. It's not a place that you'd dwell. So that section of the wall, the wall is higher, and as you kind of get towards the new open space, again, it is still quite high here. That is 1.3 meters there, so around kind of 30 centimeters higher than what it is at the moment. And then as you get into that open space, you can see how it's been designed to have a raised platform here, so that members of the public can, you can get those panoramic views across it, and there is, public amenity in terms of seating to compensate for what was proposed to be removed in other parts of the site. And the wall here is around 1.2 meters. The rest of wall F, as you walk towards the pleasure pier, the height of the wall is 1.2 meters, slightly higher than existing. And this plan just shows. This is my kind of crude markup on here, but this just shows roughly how visibility would be limited around the site. So the first section you'd have good visibility as existing. This kind of second section here, about 110 meters, it would be limited because the wall's around 1.75 meters, and then along the kind of northern bit, there would be kind of the wall would be around 1.2 meters. So most people are going to see over that, but it would be there will be some restriction there, which in the officer's report and opinion that's compensated for by the new open space here. And overall, it's about 75% of the length of the wall would be visible over the top or have only limited restriction. So coming on to the key planning considerations, the principle of the development, the existing walls are in a poor state of repair. And they're in need of urgent replacement, as you've seen from the photos and the applicant's reports. So the replacement is wholly acceptable in principle, and the improved open space and pedestrian cycle routes are also acceptable in principle. In terms of design, landscape, and local character, the design has been amended over the course of determination in response to officers' comments and concerns. Those changes have improved the design. At the end of the day, it is what it is. It is a seawall. It is functional. It's fairly utilitarian in that design. But the open spaces are an improvement, and overall the design is considered to be compatible, and the landscaping is acceptable, subject to conditions. And just to point out there on trees, you see in the report there that the landscape officer does say that there's potential here for tree planting within the site. The site hasn't got any, it's hard surfacing at the moment apart from the planters. It hasn't got any trees, and in the absence of a policy for net gain of trees within the site, I think the officer's view is that it's acceptable without new tree planting in the site. In terms of heritage, as I said, there were initial concerns about the impacts on the Devonshire buildings, which have been addressed by reducing the height of the wall. The report concludes that there would be less than substantial harm to the conservation area and to the railings. Those impacts come about because the railings will be replaced with a more modern designed railing. Apparently, the existing railings aren't in a condition that can be, retained along that whole length. So there's a slight less than substantial harm there on the conservation area at the kind of lower end, and then there would also be harm to the railings as well, a non-designated heritage asset. And because the railings go along pretty much the whole of the esplanade, that's like the whole asset, and the part that would be lost is relatively small, so the harm is judged to be kind of less than substantial, but at the lower end of that scale. The report does encourage that the applicant finds a way to incorporate some of the railings within the site, but it's not mandated, and in the officer's view, it's not something that can be conditioned, because it's not needed to make the development acceptable in planning terms. So overall, there is some harm there, but that's outweighed by public benefits, and the benefits outweigh the harm to the non-designated asset as well. In terms of amenity, the council's environmental health officer doesn't raise an objection, and there's a condition there on well, there isn't a condition on noise, but there's a condition on dust and particulate matter as well through the construction process. There wouldn't be a significant adverse impact on residential amenity, and the open spaces and changes that have come about through the determination process improve the public amenity within the site as well. In terms of highways, highways officers are here to kind of answer any kind of detailed queries on that, but the conclusion is that there wouldn't be an highway safety issue. Construction traffic impacts can be appropriately managed through standard planning conditions, and the slight reduction in car parking in the site is acceptable. It's a large car park, and there's very kind of small changes overall. In terms of ecology and biodiversity, this scheme is subject to biodiversity net gain. Net gains would be secured. That would be through a combination of on-site provision, the new planter, and also off-site credits as well. And the credits relate to the kind of reclaimed land. At the moment, it's beach, and that has a biodiversity value. It's necessary to construct the seawall on that beach, so that's where the harm lies. And because of the way the development's designed, it's not possible to mitigate that within the site, and off-site credits are considered necessary. In terms of the planning application is just for the works above the mean low water mark, but it's also relevant for us to consider impacts below the mean low water mark and how they might be considered by the Marine Management Organisation. And in that respect, there's seagrass. Seagrass is a protected marine species. It's it is prevalent in the bay, in Weymouth Bay here, and also in and around the harbour. So the applicant has demonstrated that there isn't a way that they can design these flood defences without avoiding harm to seagrass. Because the seagrass lies in the sea and in the jurisdiction of the MMO, the applicant's going through a process of trying to agree a mitigation compensation scheme for the loss of seagrass. And as it stands, the applicant has submitted further information to the Marine Management Organisation. They've consulted Natural England, but Natural England haven't yet provided a response about whether the mitigation is acceptable. So you'll see that on the recommendation here, there is a slightly unusual recommendation that we hold off issuing a decision until that process has been concluded. But at the moment, it looks like there is a package there that could be workable, but we wouldn't want to issue a approval unless that was confirmed from the MMO. In terms of flood risk and drainage, the proposals would upgrade existing sea defences and wouldn't cause increased flooding elsewhere. There's adequate drainage within the scheme as well. In terms of ground conditions, there's that small spot of contaminated land near to the site, and there's a standard condition proposed there to manage that risk. And the development isn't EIA development. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission, and that's, as I've said, subject to the confirmation from the MMO that the parallel marine licensing application secures appropriate mitigation and compensation, and we should receive written confirmation from the MMO if and when that is the case. The planning conditions proposed relate to the time limit, approved plans. There's construction-related ones on the construction traffic management plan requested by Highways, construction parking and lighting. The footway works to be designed and align with the requirements of Highways. There's a dust and airborne particles management plan to manage the effects of construction within the beach, so that it's not kicking up dust and particulate matter that could be an amenity concern. And there's landscape conditions here on the details, landscape management plan, implementation and maintenance, and the retention of that pleasure pier sign as well. There's an unexpected contamination condition, and there's also a requirement for a level 1 historic building record. That's the kind of basic photographic record of the pleasure pier sign and the railings before they're removed, just to make sure that there's a record of that. So that concludes my officer presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you very much for that presentation. That was very comprehensive, I think. There are no members of the public registered to speak. However, we do have an applicant speaking in the form of Mr. Antonio España, who's a project engineer for Dorset Council. Sorry? No. Afterwards, after we've had the speaking, then Matthew will have an opportunity to respond to the speakers, and then the floor will be open to the members. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Antonio España. I work as a project engineer for the Coastal Risk team at Dorset Council, and I stand before you to speak in support for our application of replacement and strengthening of Weymouth Harbour Walls FNG being considered at this committee. The proposal will not only safeguard the community by reducing flood risk, but also enhance public spaces and contribute to the regeneration of the peninsula. The existing seawalls are severely corroded and in urgent need of replacement. The proposal will provide a design upgrade with a design life of 75 years, reducing flood risk up to a year of 2060. The design of the walls has been carefully considered. It minimizes harm to heritage assets, maintains the visual amenity of the area, and enhances public realm with new open public spaces. These open spaces will allow uninterrupted views of the Weymouth Esplanade, beach and bay over the city fences. The proposal includes footpath improvements creating accessible pedestrian and cycle routes around the site. This will not only improve public access, but also promote active travel, improving the community well-being, and will also deliver significant economic benefits by providing short-term jobs and support local businesses. The planning officer's report clearly outlines key planning matters associated with the proposal and confirms that consultees' responses, such as Dorset Council's conservation, natural environment team, and Weymouth Civic Society, have been addressed and incorporated into design accordingly. The planning officer concludes that the proposal is wholly acceptable and is in accordance with both NPPF and local planning policies set out in Weymouth Local Plan and Weymouth Neighbourhood Plan. I would like to draw particular attention to the comments from Weymouth Town Council and ward councillors that have consistently expressed their total support for the scheme, recognizing its crucial nature and the role it plays in flood defense and regeneration of Weymouth. In conclusion, the replacement and strengthening of harbour walls F&G is an essential project. It will provide necessary protection, taking into consideration climate change and anticipated sea level rises, and ensure safety and resilience of our harbour for years to come. We will continue to engage with the Marine Management Organization regarding the parallel marine license application to ensure appropriate mitigation and compensation is secured for any loss of marine ecology and facilitate the written response as requested by the case officer. The application is recommended for approval, and we respectfully request that members grant planning permission subject to the conditions recommended. Thank you for your time, people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Espana. Matthew, is there anything you want to respond to there? I take it there isn't. Okay. In that case, members, you can now ask questions of a technical nature to the officer. I think Councillor Weller was first, followed by Councillor Kimber. Thank you.
Thanks. Just for clarity, really, Matthew, you spoke about the planters. That sort of rather brutalist paved raised bit with the planter at the top. Is that where you're? Just for clarity, that's where you're repurposing that and making it. Is that what looks like a strange skate park bit at the moment? That's being flattened down.
Yeah, that's where it is. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I have to say I'm delighted. And the other question I've got, and the slide you had that showed the seagrass actually indicates what I'm talking about. When this land was reclaimed originally back in the 70s, it significantly changed the bay area there, as you can imagine. So the water was much deeper by the side of that pleasure pier prior to the land reclamation. And I'm just wondering whether anybody has done, it's not significant, it doesn't alter my view that the seawalls need doing, but I'm just wondering whether we've done any modelling on what the impact will be of the tides and so on. We're not coming out a huge distance, not like we did back in the 70s, but we're still altering that a little bit. And I'm just wondering whether we have any idea of what that impact will be, because certainly it changed that area of the beach.
Yeah, I've got to say I don't know. It's planning's to do with everything above that mean low water mark. So this may well be something that the Marine Management Organisation are considering, and I suppose because that application is live, any concerns you might want to put to them, and the applicant may well be able to tell us how they've modelled it. But as a planner, it's not something I've looked into on this.
Thank you, Councillor Weller and Matthew, for that one. Councillor Kimber, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Katie stole my thunder on one of my questions, was the tide and particularly the modelling. I know when Weymouth and Portland used to do this particular work, they used to go off to, I believe it was Reading University. That's where they used to do it. And I think in the archives there's probably quite a lot of information about past modelling. The other question I was concerned about, one is to get 75 years out of the particular materials is probably about right, and I'm fully in support of this, and be a fantastic addition. Well, fantastic to get this right. I'd like to know what the materials are going to be made. Can we say that this next materials that we're going to put, it might be the engineer want to take this on, will we get 75 years out of it again, or are the materials a lot more advanced than what they were? That's one question. And just a bit of concern about the sinkhole. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. I'll pass that one over to Matthew, but I'm sure he said that the materials would last 75 years. But I'm not quite sure what you mean by the concern on the sinkhole. That'll be covered up by the new walls. So just bear with me a second. I'll just switch. Second, Mr. Councillor Kimber, I'll turn this off so that people can hear what you're saying.
Yeah, it was just a concern about that we'd had the sinkhole, and whether the survey is going to say, well, now we've going to have the new walls. This should eradicate any further sinkholes or in that particular area. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. Matthew, would you like to respond to that, please?
Yeah. So the sinkhole would be covered up by the new walls. I think my understanding is, yes, they have a design life of 75 years, and that's not because of the height of the wall. It's because of the kind of durability of the materials. The applicant may be able to confirm the exact thickness and the spec, but my understanding is it's a steel wall, sheet piled wall, which has wood on there for ecological reasons, but that is designed with a 75-year lifespan, at which point it may need replacing. But as we've seen with this current wall, it's been monitored, and they've identified cavities in it, so that would presumably take place around in 75 years' time as well.
Thank you, Matthew. I think that answers the questions. I'll just check. Are you happy with that, Councillor Kimber? Lovely, thank you. I think Councillor Monks was next, followed by Councillor Bown, and followed by Councillor Christopher. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Craig Monks, Bedminster Ward. Before I ask the question, I am going to slightly caveat and be happy to accept that it's either shown some naivety on my part, or perhaps it's sort of commercially sensitive. So if it's a short response, it's absolutely fine. But I know from the previous questions, we've talked about the shelf life of materials, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also aware that there are conversations happening on a completely different matter around regeneration of Weymouth as a bigger piece. Is this work being treated completely separate to that or not? And kind of regardless if it is or not, how kind of future-proof is this work to what might happen in the future? I know you understand why I put the caveats at the start, but ultimately, if this on its own is a sort of 75-year shelf life, other things we do in the immediate area may affect that shelf life, and I just wonder how that might balance out. It's a waffly question, but I think you get my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Monks. I think we get your point. I'm not quite sure how we proceed with this one due to the fact of we need to treat this application on its own merits, but I will pass it over to Matthew to see if he wants to elaborate. Thank you. Matthew?
Yeah, so you're right. We're treating this application on its own merits as an application that's come forward. We have considered whether it would be compatible with the wider with the allocation which we've got in the plan, and that that is for the wider regeneration of this area. The the development is fairly limited on around the edge of the site. So it doesn't, in our view, compromise the ability to redevelopment within it. And you'll see in the report we talk about tree planting, and if there was a future mixed-use development as anticipated, you might expect that includes tree planting around that edge of which the scheme is compatible with. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Monks, you happy with that? Okay, that's lovely. Moving on then to Louise Bown, please.
Thank you, Chair. Louise Bown, Radipole Ward. So I wanted to ask about, the raised part in the corner to enable views. That piece of land, local people and people from further afield come to look at the lovely views. They're among the best views in Weymouth. At the end of the Stone Pier, you can see the harbour and the bay. It's phenomenal. And I just wondered why it isn't more built up. So that corner that's built up, I'm wondering why the approach to that isn't more built up. So you can, as you're walking along, you can see the view the whole time as you're strolling out on the pier.
Yep, thank you, Matthew. Would you like to answer that one, please?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question. There would be some restriction along that route through. I think the applicants come up with a solution here, which has a raised platform at the northern part of the site, and then you've got the existing open space. I think we're satisfied that that's sufficient to maintain and enhance public amenity, whilst appreciating that it will close down some opportunities for views across the bay, particularly on that section between the existing and proposed open space. So I think our view is it strikes the right balance, and what you've got there at the new open space is a kind of significant enhancement on what you've got at the moment, which are very simple raised concrete platforms with a couple of benches on. This space lends itself to more use by the public. With grass, which is currently lacking. It's
Thank you, Matthew. Are you happy with that, Councillor Bown?
I'm not sure, really. I feel like sufficient. Why are we aiming for sufficient? It's such a central part of Weymouth, and which is, as Councillor Monks pointed out, undergoing, hopefully in due course, regeneration. I wonder why we're not going for the best rather than merely sufficient. We could have the view from the corner and have view from walking along at the same time. I don't see why we couldn't do that. But that's all I want to say, really. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bown. Matthew, do you want to come back again on that one, or are you happy to leave it as it is? You are happy to leave it as it is. Okay, thank you very much. We now have Councillor Simon Christopher, please.
Good morning, Chair. Councillor Simon Christopher, Dorset Councillor for the Marshwood Vale Ward. Weymouth is a town of great character and charm. And what I'm going to say is such that I wouldn't want to see Weymouth disadvantaged in terms of this proposal for the railings. In order to talk about this, it's almost like a history lesson. But when I say disadvantaged, I need to refer to a previous application in the days of the old West Dorset District Council in respect of Lyme Regis at the east end of the promenade, where there was a proposal to replace the cast iron railings with aluminium railings. Now, we know in Lyme Regis there are aluminium railings in front of the amusement arcade and also in front of the amazing sea defences right to the east of the town. But there are cast iron railings, and with the benefit of hindsight, the decision of West Dorset District Council, which did go to a planning committee, and it turned on the decision of the chair to actually retain those railings. And it's a very important part of Lyme Regis. And I wouldn't want to see Weymouth disadvantaged in any way. And we've heard mention of regeneration this morning. So I think given the character and charm of Weymouth itself, and indeed the character and charm of the councillors. And I wouldn't want to step on their toes, but I think this is an important point, and we should actually look to have cast iron railings where there are cast iron railings, and where there are iron railings, they should be repaired. Now, of course, part of the new area, we call it the new area of the 1970s, might look stark to some people, but where, for instance, there are iron railings anywhere in the vicinity of listed buildings, Dorset Council needs to do everything to retain the image of Weymouth, and indeed to look to proper regeneration, as other colleagues have said. So that is my comment.
Thank you for that, Councillor Christopher. Matthew, would you like to respond? Can I just add to that? I am concerned as well that would these railings be in keeping with all the other new railings proposed in Weymouth? Is it a standard style? Because I think there's quite a few going in, aren't there? But over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Yeah, my understanding is the new railings will be of a similar style to what there is at the moment with the kind of some of the recently upgraded cedar fences, like what we have down at Custom House Quay. So they're a different style to what you've got along the whole of the Esplanade. The railings are a non-designated heritage asset. Yeah, I, as planning officer, and our conservation officer have looked at this matter. You see in the report that we do encourage the retention of the railings where possible and inclusion within the landscaping scheme. That's not like ruled out, but it's not mandated. And the reason why we don't feel we can mandate it is because it comes down to the test on non-designated heritage assets. There's harm to the railings, a non-designated heritage asset. That's at the kind of lower end of the less than substantial harm spectrum. But there are significant benefits of the development through the, including the open spaces, some of the economic benefits, but most importantly, the cedar fences. And they are such that they outweigh the harm to this area. Ideally, we want to get in a position where there is no harm, and the applicants advise that the condition of the railings is poor and they're not suitable for retention.
Back to you, Councillor Christopher. It may not, I hope it answers your question. It may not satisfy your point, but you're welcome to speak back.
I'm sure members have taken in what I have said.
Yeah, lovely point made. Councillor Weller, I believe you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Weller, Rodwell and Wyke. Are we now in debate, or we're still in technical questions? Sorry.
It's okay. We are still in questions for the officer. We have not yet moved to debate. Okay, I will let members know when we move to debate, make it quite clear. So please don't fret. Councillor Roper.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question regarding the shelf life, basically, of this of the walls, and as quoted 75 years. I'm just wondering at this stage is there any sort of structured management plan for surveying the walls to ensure we that we don't get into the issues that have occurred in various other areas of the wall where unexpected issues have seem to have arisen because there wasn't regular sort of maintenance or management of the seawalls.
In planning terms, it's not a proposed requirement of the planning conditions. As landowner, you'd expect that Dorset Council would monitor that, but it falls outside of the planning assessment, and I don't know the details of how that would work.
Okay, Matthew, thank you for that. Councillor Roper, obviously it's a difficult question for Matthew to answer, but do you want to add anything to that, or are you happy with the response? You are happy, okay. Any other technical questions or questions of any kind, actually, to the officer from members, please? No, I don't see any. In that case, we will now move to debate. Members, over to you. Councillor Weller, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Weller, still of Rodwell and Wyke. This scheme has been in discussion for, I think, probably 10 years now. So all sorts of iterations of the design have gone through and through and through, and money was available and time has gone on. So it's not been knocked together on the back of a fag packet. You know, so that's the first thing to think of. In terms of the change of railings and so on, as Councillor Christopher said, this bit of reclamation was 1977. I don't think we're suggesting changing the heritage railings. These are of relatively small value. I would like to see that the new railings do reflect, not that I especially like them, indeed I don't, but I'd like them to reflect the railings that we've got at Custom House Quay, so that we've got a theme running through. It's not a whole lot of different things, and I think that that's what Matthew was suggesting, and I think that the last time I was involved in any discussion, that was what was thought. Clearly railings are required at that point, and that's rather a shame, but it has to be. In answer to the looking at the condition of the seawall as it goes on, in reality, there was little surprise among the people involved in harbour management of the things that were happening at the wall. They are examined very regularly and reported on very regularly, as you know, Chairman. It simply was that the funds weren't put there to be doing that regular maintenance. I think that that's something that this council are now very aware of, and future councillors hopefully will take that on board. So hopefully we won't be ever in the same situation that suddenly we say, well, we knew it was bad, but actually it's fallen in. We'll be doing it in a more timely fashion. So I don't think we need to worry about that. I think also it's useful to note that Weymouth Town Council have said they're very happy that the seawall is finally being dealt with. I know that the Harbours Committee are very, very happy that this is now being presented. And even the Civic Society, who are not very easy to please, have agreed that it is being done. I think that there's, I understand Councillor Bound's discussion on the viewing area, but again, that was part of a lot of negotiation on it, and it's the best possible option on what we've got to work at, because, it's a natural environment and we have to think of all sorts of things there. So I'm, having been involved with that area now for over 20 years, I'm delighted that we're now at this point. And I would like to propose that we approve the application. Oh,
yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the clarifications on that, Councillor Weller. It's very helpful. We do have a proposal to accept the recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kimber. I'd like to park that for the time being, because other members haven't had a chance to speak in the debate yet. So anybody else would like to speak, please? Thank you, Councillor Bown.
I'd like to go back to railings. I'm really glad that Councillor Christopher brought up the railings. I've just had a quick look on Google Street View at the railings on Custom House Quay, and I think it would be a real shame if the railings matched the railings on Custom House Quay. In terms of continuity, surely it would be much better if they matched the railings along the seafront. Even if I don't really care what they're made of, or I don't care what's underneath the white and blue paint and the shape, But if they're looky-likey ones, if they look the same, that would be much better. Having said that, I'm really torn because clearly the work is urgent, and I don't want this to be caught up in planning hell where it doesn't where the wall gets eaten away and it's a more expensive repair for the sake of some railings. But I feel there seems to be quite an easy win, doesn't there, in terms of stipulating that the railings are looky-likey with the ones on the seafront.
Thank you, Councillor Bown. Can I move to Anne Collins, please? Anne, is there any merit in the proposal that we try to tie down the design of these railings at this stage, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we could amend the landscaping condition. I haven't got the number right in front of me. Matt, tell me what it is. To potentially, maybe they do follow the design of Custom House Quay, which are quite simple, but the ones at Custom House Quay are black. And I'm sure we could agree a scheme with the applicant where the new ones at the Peninsula are painted white and blue to more closely, because it's kind of the paint colour that kind of gives them their distinctive feature along the Esplanade to a certain extent, because you've got the various buildings along there as well that are blue and white. So I wonder if a paint scheme might be acceptable to members, because that is something we could control through the condition.
Thank you.
Is the one that talks about railings, etc., so we could amend that, Chair.
Councillor Bown, can I ask if that condition change would satisfy your question?
It would go some way, but they're a distinctive shape along the seafront as well, aren't they? They've got the things on the top, whereas they're a different shape on along Custom House Quay. So I feel like we need to stipulate both or not. I feel if you had the more simple shape from Custom House Quay painted blue and white, that would look really odd and wouldn't help at all. They would need to match the ones along the seafront, which I feel as not a planning officer, it feels like that's quite an easy win to stipulate that.
Okay, thank you for that. First of all, I'd like to go to Anne Collins again to see if that is feasible. And if we wish to proceed on that basis, we would need a proposer and a seconder for the amendment to the condition. Anne, please.
Chair, I mean, yes, if members feel strongly about this and wish to vote on it, then we could amend Condition 8, Part C, to require details and means of enclosure and training structures with railings to match the existing. I would remind members we should only really we are required to only condition things where otherwise we would refuse it without that condition. So I think the question to point to members is, would they be looking at a recommendation for refusal potentially if those railings weren't matching? So that's just to bear in mind, officers can amend that condition, but there's been, there's reasons stated by the applicant, and we've explained our kind of justification in terms of not feeling it's essential in terms of that heritage character, and that the benefits of the scheme outweigh the less than substantial harm. But it's for members to consider and vote on, Chair.
Yes, thank you for that, Anne. I think members, are you taking that on board? I think the question is, are you going to refuse this scheme or minded to if those railings aren't conditioned as such? Could I go back to Councillor Bown on that? I'm seeing a lot of people shaking their heads, so...
Yeah, that does put it in perspective. I mean, I did preface my comments with I didn't want to see this hold up the development. Obviously, it's essential that the works are done. Is there a different amendment we can put in place? Something like we recommend that they match the seafront rather than we stipulate that they match the seafront?
This way of an informative or something, Councillor Collins?
We could put an informative on, reflecting this discussion here today. However, it doesn't actually obviously require the applicant to do it, and we'd have no control over the applicant doing it. But it would be obviously a reflection of members' discussion and sort of show members' intentions with regards to it.
Thank you, Anne. I've just been in discussions with our legal officer, and he'd like to speak on this one. So I'll pass over to Phil Crowther.
Thank you, Chair. Just a minor comment. I'm not wholly convinced that that's the kind of matter that an informative note should be used for. I think what we can say, though, is that the applicant is in the room, that they've heard what members have to say, and rather than an informative saying, we hope that the railings will, I think it would be better left if you're acceptable that the applicant's heard what you've said and will hopefully take a steer from you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. I believe we still had some councillors' hands up. I remember seeing Councillor Christopher's and also Councillor Monk's hands up, and Councillor Kimber. Please do not get too mired in this one, I think. Councillor Christopher.
Yes, it's merely the fact that I'm sure many people in Dorset would like to see an almost mend and make do policy where the railings are concerned, whether that's an informative or otherwise. I refer to the legal officer for his comment.
Thank you, Councillor Christopher. Councillor Monks, please.
I'll keep this brief, Chair, from your previous comments, and it may well be that can you hear me now? All I was going to add is, from my personal perspective, if colleagues that represent Weymouth and surrounding areas of Weymouth feel that an amendment would be suitable, I would be led by their advice. I would want to see this refused on the basis of types of railings. I go to Weymouth to buy an ice cream, take the dog for a walk. I don't pay much attention to the railings, but if my colleagues feel that that would be a benefit, I'd be happy to follow that and sort of keep this as short as possible.
Okay, thank you. I think at the moment we're feeling that perhaps an amendment or to the condition isn't necessary, as Phil Crowther said, that the applicant is in the room, and I'm wondering whether I can get a nod from the applicant that they've taken this on board and would look at it, please. In that case, Councillor Kimber.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is not rocket science. Someone who's done an engineering apprenticeship who had to do a bit of time in the foundry, so it's not going to be difficult to make these rates. I think we're making a lot of hard work on this, but the essential part is that we actually, this is the lifeblood of Weymouth, and I really just want to see us get on with it. And you've given us the concerns of what's happening along the landscaping area, the sinkholes. So I think if we don't get on with it, I think we certainly have to pay the price of the people of the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. I did note, David Shortell, you haven't actually spoken in debate yet. Is there anything you wish to add or speak to the proposal on the table?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I haven't spoken because, of course, I don't come from that particular area, but I would be very disappointed to have very essential work delayed because of the design of the railings, although, of course, it is important that because, of course, that's for appearance purposes, but it would be very disastrous if it were delayed for any reason like that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shortell. Are all members happy that they have sufficient information to enable them to make an informed decision on this application? If not, please raise your hands. Thank you. Anne, could we have the recommendation on the screen, please, just for members? I noticed Matthew left just in time, or perhaps too early. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Matthew just needed to use the facilities. Let me just find the recommendation and share it. Bear with me. He'll be back by the time I manage to share this, won't he? that's not going to work for me. We'll just give him a minute and he'll come back. And then, here we go, maybe. Yeah. Ooh. Why is that not sharing? Saved by the bell. The expert's back. I'm trying to share your recommendation slide.
Members, just bear with. I think we're nearly there. Okay, Matthew, not to worry. I think members are aware of the recommendation. So, to recap, we have a proposal from Councillor Weller that's been seconded by Councillor Kimber. All members have had the opportunity to speak on the proposal. So, can I have a show of hands for all of those in favour of accepting the recommendation of the officer, including the conditions? Thank you. We have... That's 8-4. Any against? None against. Any abstentions? Councillor Bown has abstained. Thank you very much. So that recommendation is carried. We now move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is application P/FUL/2024/02116, which is the Tyre and Exhaust Centre, Westway Road, Weymouth, DT4 8SU. It's again introduced by Matthew Pochin Hawkes, and just for the benefit of the members of the public and also the committee, Councillor Simon Christopher had pre-warned me he has a personal business to attend to this morning and may have to leave the chamber, and he has just done so, so we will not see him return. Thank you. Over to you, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is a full planning application for demolition of an existing car garage occupied by QuickFit on the west side of Westway Road for the construction of 7 dwellings with associated access, parking and landscaping. And it's being reported to the planning committee because it includes Dorset Council land. My laptop's working, but my pointer's not, so I'll just try and describe as we go along this presentation. So this is the site. It includes the access from Westway Road up to the QuickFit site. You can see the red line is a bit kind of convoluted here, and that's because the red line's been changed over the course of the application to include some additional land. This is an aerial view showing the surrounding area. To the east is Westway Road and Weymouth Harbour. There we go. To the south lies the former gasworks site, of which the gas holders, for which the site formed a part of that. To the west is Granville Road, where you've got 2-storey terraced housing. To the north here is a vacant parcel of land which had planning permission for redevelopment of about 23 homes, but that expired towards the end of last year. And to the northeast is a site owned by SGN. So the designations and constraints, it's within the defined development boundary, within the town centre of Weymouth. It is allocated under Policy Way 7 of the local plan. Policy Way 7 is here in blue. It includes much of the land on the west side of Westway Road and North Quay, and it promotes the mixed-use development of that area for a range of uses, including residential, hotel, commercial, small-scale retail, and an active street and waterfront as well. Other constraints, the site falls within, the majority of the site falls within flood zone 1, but the access falls within flood zones 2 and 3, and that's affected by tidal flooding. You can see flood zone 2 here in purple, and then the yellow colour is flood zone 3, but that includes the kind of end of that access there where it joins Westway Road. The site is near to the Weymouth Town Centre Conservation Area, which extends to include Weymouth Harbour, and the site is within 5 kilometres of Cheslin-on-the-Fleet SAC. This just shows the medium pressure gas pipelines under the site, as you'd expect with the nearby gas holders site, and there's a current gas substation here as well. And in terms of land ownership, the access is all within Dorset Council's ownership, as is land to the north and land to the south. So site photos, we're just going to start at the entrance on Westway Road. This is the only entrance to the site. As you can see, there's no pedestrian access to the site. That is an existing highway safety issue, as pedestrians have to walk within the road, walk within the carriageway to get up to the site. As you can see, the site levels ramp up into the site. I think level change is about 1.5 meters. And yeah, there isn't a footway here. This photo just shows the gas substation here, which is on the left-hand side of the access as you walk up to the site. And then when you get to the corner of the site, you can see the Quick Fit building here, industrial utilitarian building. The boundary treatments are, you've got palisade fencing here, and you can see the tops of some trees which are behind the Quick Fit building as well. So walking into the site and looking west towards Granville Road, you can just about see the tops of those properties behind the Quick Fit building, and note the level change here as well. And you can also see the trees behind the Quick Fit building, and there's a kind of narrow strip of soft landscaping there, which is noted in the report. Then leaving the site and looking down the access road again, you can see the vacant site to the north, which had planning permission but doesn't anymore. And then there's an industrial building here which is used by SGN. And then looking down the road again, you can see the drop-in levels back to Westway Road, and views into the conservation there across the harbour. And just to show you the existing properties on Granville Road, just to note their simple design and detailing with porches and brick detailing. This is the proposed development. So it comprises the demolition of the garage building and construction of 7 3-bed properties. These will be arranged in 2 terraces, one terrace here of 3 units and another terrace here of 4 units. Each house would have its own rear garden, bike store, and there would be 2 car parking spaces with electrical vehicle charging facilities as well. There's a communal bin store here for refuse collection. There are a number of trees planted around the site. You can just about see here in red where the existing trees are proposed to be removed, but on the proposed plan, I think you've got 17 trees which are around the perimeter of the site and entrance, and within people's and within the gardens of those dwellings as well. That would compensate for the loss of those existing trees. In terms of access, to overcome the existing highway safety issue, a new footway would be introduced, joining up with the existing pavement, so that would allow a safe route into the site for pedestrians. And as a result of that new footway and the constraint of the SGN substation here, the road would, the carriageway would be narrowed in this part to 4.5 metres, down from 6 metres. These are the elevations of the three terrace block. They're 2.5 storey homes. The roofs would be tiled and slate. Each unit would have solar PV. They'd be constructed in red brick with grey powder-coated aluminium windows and a zinc porch. They they've also got brick detailing as well, vertical brick detailing shown on the plan. So they're relatively simple, but reflective of a kind of more modern interpretation of what we've got on Granville Road at the moment. The floor plans, they're that's what the floor plans are, and you notice at the second floor level there's it's in the roof space, and there's a reduced footprint there, and you can see the projection on these of the entrance canopy as well. The four unit terrace of three beds is the same design, so there's a consistency there across the development, and the floor plans are consistent as well. So on highways, just to talk to a couple of things before I go through the main planning considerations, in an effort to try and overcome the concerns raised by highways, there's been an iterative process of amendments that have come through and addressed in the report. But one of the concerns from highways is that two vehicles can't pass each other, two large vehicles can't pass each other in this narrowed width of 4.5 metres. To try and address that, what the applicants proposed is to introduce some white lining within the road, essentially a give-way marker here and some signage, so that anyone entering the site and approaching this way would need to give way to oncoming traffic. I think there's space here for about, it's about 16 metres here to the entrance, which would allow for about 3 cars to kind of queue if necessary. In terms of off-site improvements, highways have picked up on a concern that there isn't a safe way to cross this road apart from walking down to Asda and going across that junction. And there's a bus stop, a southbound bus stop on Westway Road, which residents may feel the need to dart across the road at a kind of unsafe point. So the applicant has proposed that they would introduce a new safe pedestrian and cycle crossing. On the right here, that's just the illustrative design for it, and that would need to be secured by a Grampian condition. Vehicle tracking. What you can see on the bottom one here is the vehicle tracking for an 8 metre rigid vehicle, which shows that it could turn within the site. On the top is a refuse collection vehicle. Now, because of the design of the site, it isn't possible for a refuse vehicle to enter the site within forward gear. So what we've got here on the tracking from the applicant is that a refuse collection vehicle would need to reverse into the site if it were to turn in this location and exit onto Westway Road. So moving on to the key planning considerations. As set out in the report, the principle of the loss of the garage and the redevelopment for residential is considered acceptable. In terms of design and visual amenity, the design is simple, takes a modern interpretation of the properties on Granville Road, and that is judged to maintain local identity, distinctiveness, and respect the character of the area. The housing mix, there are 7 3-bed homes. They meet a need for 3-bed family-sized homes within Weymouth. That mix is acceptable. There isn't any affordable housing. Again, that's judged to be acceptable in line with the local plan, and it's recognised that the emerging Weymouth neighbourhood plan does seek financial contributions for small schemes below 10 units, but because that hasn't been through examination and there's conflict with the NPPF and the local plan, officers haven't given that. We've given that very limited weight, and affordable housing wouldn't be a requirement on here. Heritage, the only heritage asset nearby is the Weymouth Town Centre Conservation Area. The judgment is that it doesn't harm the significance of the Weymouth Conservation Area. Residential amenity, given the change in levels and separation distances from residential properties on Granville Road, the residential amenity of occupiers of those properties wouldn't be significantly adversely effective. It's acceptable distances. Internally within the site, it's arranged in a way that each property would have sufficient residential amenity, they'd have their own garden, spacing would be acceptable. Yes, it is in an area of vacancy with a nearby site, and we don't quite know what's going to come forward for new uses, but there isn't a requirement there for a planning condition on noise. The closest existing employment use is the SGN site, and that's kind of arranged in a way so you've got a courtyard facing away from the site, so noise is not considered to be a constraint. In terms of highways, that's covered in the report. There is an objection from highways, and highways are here to answer questions. They object and recommend refusal on the basis that there is a reduced width of the access road, and that would introduce conflict between residents, their visitors, and industrial traffic which use the site access. They also object on the basis of the refuse collection vehicles not being able to enter and exit the site in forward gear or turn within the site, and they consider that the layout would prejudice the comprehensive development of the area in terms of vehicle and pedestrian access. As you see in the report, planning officers have come to a different view, taking into account the MPPF and the balance that needs to be struck there. So I've got on screen here the proposals for the white lining, and what planning officers consider is that overcomes the issue of the conflict with industrial traffic and residential traffic, because it allows up to kind of 3 cars to wait in this space if a oncoming large vehicle were to be trying to exit at the same time. And given there's there's only seven dwellings here, the applicant has done a parking accumulation study which seems to address that. The northwestern site, it is allocated for redevelopment. The previous proposals had vehicle connections through to surrounding roads, so it may well be that future connections go in through there. And the introduction of the proposed crossing here would address the concerns on pedestrian safety on Westway Road. In terms of refuse service vehicles, the proposed bin store is located here on near the entrance to the site. That is within 10 metres of the access and within the recommended drag distances for refuse collection. So a refuse collection vehicle could well service the site from here and then turn further along the access road, or it could reverse into the site, which is not ideal, but not considered unacceptable in planning terms. So overall, that the planning officer's judgment is that highway concerns have been satisfactorily addressed. Flood risk and drainage. This is the kind of key issue on this application. The homes are in flood zone 1. They're at a safe level above the predicted design flood level, but the access falls within flood zones 2 and 3. In planning terms, housing must be safe for its lifetime, being 100 years, and a residual flood risk must be considered. Because this site is affected by tidal flooding, a design flood risk event is a 1 in 200 year event, and that's what must be planned for. The applicant has submitted a flood risk assessment, and they've also submitted flood warning and evacuation plans, which I'll come on to. The FRA, it doesn't model the depths along Westway Road. I think we're all in agreement that the depths would be quite significant, and it doesn't make reference to the council's strategic flood risk assessment for Weymouth, which was introduced in February last year. So I'm going to go through some of the plans from the strategic flood risk assessment now, and just to show the kind of 1 in 200 year risk. The EA have responded to this application, the consultation. I think they say the depths would be around 1.6 metres on Westway Road in a design flood event, overtopping the existing flood defences, and that lines up with what the council's strategic flood risk assessment says. And the strategic flood risk assessment goes into some detail on all the allocated sites within the town centre, and what it says is that users you need to address user safety throughout the lifetime of the development, and it acknowledges that safe access and egress will be important for this site and the wider allocation. the SFRA does cover a longer period than the lifetime of this development. So what I'm just showing here are the 1 in 30-year risks just for context. And as you can see here, what it shows is at the entrance to the site, flood levels would be above 90 centimetres, and what the EA have said is they'd be around 1.6 metres along Westway Road access. The velocities would be 0.3 to 0.4 metres a second along Westway Road, so relatively high, and the hazard rating would be significant. So following review of the flood risk assessment and consultation with the Environment Agency, officers did request a flood warning and evacuation plan. That's considered essential given the flood risk to the site and there only being one access into it. So what we have on the left-hand side here is the original flood warning and evacuation plan. What that proposed is a evacuation route going north through the adjacent vacant site and linking through to Granville Road. That site doesn't have planning permission. We're not quite sure how it's going to be built out, so we can't rely on that access route as providing access through. So what the applicant has done earlier this month, they prepared an updated flood warning and evacuation plan, and that proposed a route along Westway Road down to the Asda and then up to higher ground here. And evacuation, that would work if residents evacuated before a flood occurred, and the site is within a EA flood warning zone, so they could sign up to EA flood warnings, receive flood warnings and flood alerts, and if they evacuated immediately, they would be able to do that without being at risk of flooding. The EA aims to issue flood alerts within 2 to 12 hours before a flood occurs, and flood warnings, when a flood is imminent, are aimed to be issued between 30 minutes and 2 hours before a flood occurs. The issue is we can't place full reliance on those flood warnings because they could well occur at night and residents may not be able to evacuate. What the PPG talks about is planning for that residual risk, and that includes residents not heeding the advice or receiving those advice. So because of that, there's no other way to evacuate the site, and if approved, that could place extra burden on the emergency services. As although it's tidal, the flood risk is tidal, so it would rise and fall with the tides. There could be issues of the site being accessed by emergency vehicles if someone needed attention during a flooding event, and that's considered to be unacceptable, and that is the reason for refusal there, because safe access and escape routes can't be provided, and we can't rely entirely on the flood warnings from the Environment Agency. Ecology, biodiversity and trees, matters will be acceptable subject to conditions. There'll be a net gain of trees overall. The existing trees are in poor condition. So overall, the development is acceptable in a number of respects, and it clearly makes a contribution of regenerating a brownfield site and introducing more family housing. But because of the flood risk issue, it's not considered to be acceptable, and the other benefits aren't considered to outweigh it. So accordingly, the recommendation is to approve for the reasons around safe access and escape routes. And the recommendation is subject to not issuing a decision before the 29th of January. The reason for that is because the red line was amended over the course, early January, and owners need a 21-day notice to make any comments. So if there weren't any comments received within that 21-day period, then we could issue a decision either way, approve or refuse. And you see there in bold, that's in the update sheet. There's a couple of updates on this one, but the applicant did submit another version of the flood warning and evacuation plan. That was on the previous slides as well, but it's dated 20th of January, so just updated that date for clarity. So that concludes my officer presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. That's very clear again. We have one speaker on behalf of the agent. Tivoli, would you like to say? You have 3 minutes, and I'll give you a warning in 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Over to you.
Good morning, Chair and members. Thank you for allowing me to address you in regard of this application on behalf of my client. I'm the planning agent for my client on this proposed development. I hope you have the opportunity to review the briefing notes that I've circulated to you on Tuesday evening, and we have noted the proposed development represents a quite important steps towards the regeneration of the Weymouth Town Centre as detailed in the master plan strategy that was issued back in 2015. Through this scheme, aside from the housing delivery of family-sized units, the proposed development has also contributed several public benefits, including the remediation of the existing contaminated land, as well as the incorporation of improved landscaping features, which will improve the overall character of the local area, as well as contribute to the required biodiversity net gain. We have undergone cooperative negotiations with the planning department, which arrived to a scheme that complies with the national and local policies, but only recently that the officers have did a U-turn on their positive recommendations due to the concerns regarding these flood safety, resident safety, and any flood events. While we understand the concern raised, we do not agree that the residents will be at risk. This is mainly due to, as officers mentioned, Weymouth Harbour is vulnerable to tidal flooding, but the environment agency's warning system will provide sufficient lead time for residents to be prepared before any flood events occurred. Particularly if the flood alerts will have 2 to 12 hours lead time before any potential events happened. Those alerts are issued during the waking hours between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. So people will be warned ahead of time to pack their belongings in advance, and then, okay. Cool. And then followed by the flood warning, which will allow another 6 hours lead time in tidal locations for them to evacuate before the flood reach the area. And we have already suggested the evacuation route through Westway Road and Newstead Road for evacuation. So overall, the applications will contribute to the town centre master plan for regenerations, and both the Weymouth Town Council and Civic Society has supported the schemes. So, thank you. Yes, just one sentence. So, we have noted the officers late materials from yesterday, so the applicants are happy to condition any additional materials that are required to clarify further on the flood safety measures for evacuation plan as part of the pre-commencement planning conditions. Thank you.
Please. Thank you very much. Matthew, is there anything there that you'd like to respond on, please?
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of points. The briefing note which members have received, that's published on the website just for transparency, and it's covered in the update sheet. The agent talks about a U-turn on the recommendation. Officers have considered this matter carefully on flood risk. And there has been a recent appeal decision, which we've noted in the update sheet, which is similar to this case, and makes officers' view is that we can't rely entirely on the EA flood warnings. The applicant's right that in terms of flood alerts, the EA aims to issue those within waking hours, but that's with the caveat where possible. And in terms of flood warnings, they are usually, what the EA says is they're usually issued 30 minutes to 2 hours before flooding. So again, we can't we're not satisfied that they can be issued within daytime hours and full reliance can't be placed on them.
Thank you, Matthew. That's very, very helpful. Before we move any further, members, can I just check that you've all seen the update sheets and the corrections that were on there regarding the footpath widths, ward members, and also the updated flood warning and evacuation plan? There was also an updated recommendation. So are you all happy that you've seen that? Thank you very much. So we now move to technical questions from members. To Matthew, please. Councillor Kimber, followed by Councillor Bown. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and Paul Kimber, Portland. Over the years, I was on the Weymouth and Portland Council. I wondered if we could just have a shot of the overhead on showing the electricity, the Scottish and Southern site and the gas site. Yeah, sorry. I've just asked for the overhead on particularly on that area. When I was on the Weymouth and Portland, there was always big plans for the whole of that area. In my time, I've been to, as probably many councillors have been, to several presentations, and I just wondered how whether the planners and the engineers took any consideration on the gas site, which may be coming, maybe things may be happening to it, or the electricity site. I mean, we're obviously looking at this application on its own, and we have to decide on its own. And within my housing heart, I can say this is badly needed property. But I just wondered whether that consideration and past thoughts about the enlarged site had been considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. I think you actually answered your own question halfway through that, but I'll pass it over to Matthew anyway.
Thank you. Yeah, just a bit of a technical issue trying to get the plan up. Anne's just going to try and find that and share it on screen. But I've got it on my screen now, and yeah, you've got the vacant sites north and south. It is allocated for those mix of uses. The proposal is compatible with what's proposed. I think in the report we talk about there being a greater opportunity to do a larger, a more kind of comprehensive development, but we have to assess this application on its basis and what's proposed, and it does align with the allocation and the master plan. In terms of the master plan, it talks about a mix in this zone particularly mixed use with ground floor commercial uses. Obviously, we haven't got ground floor commercial uses here, but it's set back from the road, so the approach is acceptable there. Have you got it? Yeah, that's Anne's just got the plan on screen now.
Thank you, Matthew. Councillor Kimber, I understand where you're coming from on this one, but unfortunately we are constrained by the fact that we have to look at this in isolation. It would be lovely if there was one big scheme encompassing the whole site, but there isn't, I'm afraid. Councillor Bown, did you have your hand up for technical questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Louise Bown, Radipole Ward. This probably reflects the fact that I'm relatively new on planning. I was just going to ask, what happens to the road of the site? Does it get adopted by Dorset Council, and who maintains the proposed crossing island in the middle of Westway Road?
Matthew, or we do have Highways with us for any technical questions, so perhaps pass over to Susan.
Thank you for your question. Yes, Susan Hetherington from the Highway Authority. No, the estate road hasn't been offered for adoption. We can't actually force an applicant to take on the adoption process, but we do look at the geometry of the access going into the site. And your other question was to do with the off-site works to facilitate that pedestrian link over to the other side of the Westway Road. Yeah, that will be subject to what's termed as a Section 278 agreement of the Highways Act. So we would that would be subject to other parties getting involved to make sure it is deliverable. But that would be at the applicant's own expense to provide that. Thank you.
Councillor Bown, are you happy with that, or do you want to come back?
I just got more questions. Sorry. So, in theory, do the people who live in the people who own the houses, would they own the car park and the road? And in theory, could it go to rack and ruin and not be maintained?
In terms, we can only comment on what's before us in terms of the geometry, but in terms of the ongoing legacy and the maintenance, I wouldn't be able to comment on that, but that would be the landowner. So I can pass back to Matthew. Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, and if it was approved, there'd be, expect there'd be standard landscape conditions there, including landscape management, and that would cover kind of hard and soft landscaping within the site. So that could be controlled through a planning condition.
Thank you, Matthew. Basically, it's a private road. Am I correct on that? Yes, which is the responsibility of the landowner. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bown, are you happy with that? Okay. Any more technical questions, please? If not, my Vice Chair has one. No? Okay, over to you then, please, Councillor Isink.
Councillor Isink, Egerton Ward. Thank you for the presentation. It's really helpful. I just wanted a bit of clarity, really. I think I understand the situation in relation to the opinion of Highways versus the opinion of the planning team, but I'd just like to get confirmation, really, given that you're both in the room. As I understand it, Highways still have fairly substantial concerns relating to access on this site. The situation seems to be that the planning team's view is they can see where Highways are coming from, but those concerns that Highways are expressing from a planning perspective, the planning team consider not sufficiently substantially harmful to warrant being brought in as an overarching concern in relation to refusal of the application. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's essentially correct, and that's set out at para 16.42 of the committee report, where I talk about what the MPPF says about development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual impacts on the road network following mitigation would be severe, taking into account all reasonable scenarios. What the new MPPF introduced was at para 125C, and that said that decision makers should give substantial weight to the value of using suitable brownfield land within settlements for homes, noting that such proposals should be approved unless substantial harm would be caused. Obviously, that's a new test that's been introduced by the MPPF, but it does increase the weight, the positive weight to the other benefits of the proposal. So on balance, the planning officer's view is that it overcomes the harm on highways. I'll pass over to Susan to give your view as well.
Sorry, through you, Chair, if that's okay. I might have to actually give some pointers so people can actually understand where we've reached our viewpoint. We're using industry standard guidance in the context of the local area. So first of all, we have to look at the fact that Westway Road is an A-class road. It's carrying large volumes of traffic, all types of traffic, such as HGVs. So it's designed for that traffic flow. It is a traffic-sensitive road and historically a tourist route. So the estate road layout for 7 family residential units is acceptable in principle and will remain private. However, there is the potential for conflict between the residential and industrial traffic along that access road. The applicant is proposing to redesign that service road to accommodate those pedestrian movements by way of a 1.5 metre wide footway. Well, the absolute minimum should be 2 metres due to the location, the combination of traffic patterns and the mix of HGVs and pedestrian use. And we all have a statutory duty to give due regard to inclusive mobility, which takes many forms, as we know. It could be a parent with a double buggy holding a child's hand, walking along that path, and then someone in a wheelchair that has a carer walking alongside them. So there are a range of scenarios. That's why we feel the 2 metre is the absolute minimum in a reasonable case scenario, because you can get wider footpaths. We feel, but redesigning that element of that access road, there will be a heightened conflict. So narrowing that carriageway will not allow an HGV and a car to pass. So it's likely that cars and larger vehicles will try and squeeze through those gaps. Likely that an HGV could be forced to move up onto the pavement, to bump up onto the pavement to give way for the two-way traffic. So it's really not ideal, and that's kind of where we're coming from. The other issue is that parking along that road, we haven't had any clarification as to how that could be prevented. So if people decide to park along there, that could also cause issues. Sorry, I will have to move further on in terms of the layout if I've got time, Chair. It's okay. So having a giveaway section close to the junction on the A-class road will accommodate around about 3 to 4 vehicles, and depending on those combinations, it could be a car and an HGV that waits there, or it could be a few cars. But it's definitely likely to interrupt the free flow of traffic and cause queuing and backing up onto Westway Road. They would also, any cars or vehicles that are queuing to access that road would have to negotiate or be mindful of pedestrians crossing along Westway Road. So that actually reduces the length of the capacity for queuing. So there is lack of detail in terms of the refuse collection vehicle being able to turn in and out the site. We haven't had any updated swept path analysis. And as it stands, it is contrary to paragraph 6.2 of the waste collection guidance. And we feel that this is unsafe rather than awkward. We have to consider the pedestrian movements and the footfall within the internal layout, as well as likely scenarios where pedestrians will be coming from the north and wanting to access that same footway, forgive me. So in finalising the points, this is a private estate road. It's not on the highway. It's not suitable for adoption. The proposed layout does not meet that criteria. And the criteria is there to primarily for the safe and suitable access and ease of use. So a standard carriageway width should be a minimum of 5 metres to allow for an HGV and a car to pass, and with a provision of a 2 metre wide footpath or footway. During the consultation period, we've been quite consistent in our response. We're generally accepting the principles of the actual residential estate layout and the crossing point over the Westway Road. But the numerous issues that haven't been able to be overcome, we're unable to support. And that's where we've reached the highway refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Susan, on that. Councillor Isenk, are you happy with that response?
Yes, Susan, thank you very much. That was really detailed and really helpful. Thank you.
Members, any more technical questions for the officers? Councillor Shortell, anybody else? Okay, over to you, David.
I know this is not part of the planning application, but I just wanted to, an appraisal exactly what the situation is regarding the other road which accesses the site from the north, and whether that has ever been considered as being an access to the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. No, that's not part of the application, so we're unable to comment. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor Shortell, but that is correct. As I think we're all aware, but I understand again where you're coming from on this one. It seems to be a piecemeal development in something that may get a lot bigger. Anybody else with technical questions for the officer? If not, we will move to debate. Okay, I'll open the floor to debate, please. Who would like to go first? Councillor Weller.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Councillor Weller, Rodwell and Wyke. This is quite problematic, isn't it? Because we know even 7 houses is 7 houses that 7 families, and we badly need them. And I know that this isn't a consideration, so forgive me, but this needs joined up thinking, doesn't it? This is a tiny little bit in a much bigger area, and we're looking at inadequate solutions to accommodate the 7 houses, when if we were looking at the whole, we could find a proper solution for the whole lot, both in terms of access and in terms of flooding and everything else. So whilst I like the idea of having, and they look nice, so I like the idea of that, I have to say that I feel that we need some joined up thinking here, and by refusing, hopefully we can work towards that joined up thinking. And I know that that's not a planning consideration here because we're looking at this in its own merits. But in its own merits, I don't feel it stacks up. I think that we are creating problems for those 7 families for the future if we approve it. We all know that when you have these inadequate private access system, we've got them all around the county, that residents come back and say, we'd like our road adopted, and it's not in a state that we can adopt it because it doesn't fulfil the criteria. And yet we're discussing creating that problem for our residents in the future. We're discussing creating flooding escape problems for the future, when if we look in the round, we would be mitigating that. So I will be saying refuse, simply because we're actually creating problems for 7 families further down the line, in my view, and I think that that's a great shame.
Thank you, Councillor Weller. We are still in technical questions rather than debate. And no, I will call you. Oh, sorry, I did, didn't I? Yes, I do. I do apologise. I was still thinking of, there was one technical question I meant to ask and haven't yet, so it's my fault. Please carry on with the debate. Councillor Shortell, I believe.
Thank you, Chairman. I assume from Councillor Weller's comments that in fact she's supporting the officer's recommendation to refusal, and I would like to second that, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shortell. I will park this one again until debate is finished, if that's all right. Actually, that's the point. But did you technically propose anything? I thought you did, Councillor Weller. Thank you. So we have a proposal from Councillor Weller. Could you repeat it for clarification, please?
Not word for word, I wouldn't think for a moment, would you? I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation for refusal.
Thank you very much. Perfectly clear. Councillor Shortell?
Chairman, that's exactly how I felt it was going, so yes, I agree with that.
Thank you. So we have a proposer and a seconder on the motion to... sorry, Councillor Collins is putting her hand up. Sorry, Councillor, that's twice. So you're going to have to stand for election, I think, Anne. Please speak.
Chair, I take it's in accordance with the update sheet, as I say every time. And just for clarification, obviously members need to be mindful that the recommendations it stands at the moment only relates to flood risk, whereas Councillor Weller was talking about highways as well. So we perhaps require clarity over that, Chair.
I agree, she was, but she didn't actually say that in her. Matthew, could you please put the recommendation up on the screen again, please? I'm sorry, I prefer to see it so that there's no misunderstanding by members. Thank you.
I will try, but I'm having kind of technical issues with sharing on this. And it seems Anne is also having technical issues. So I suppose what I'll do is just, refer, hopefully everyone's got a kind of copy of the report. It's as it is set out in the committee report with the update that where it talks about the submitted flood warning and evacuation plan, the only change there that is set out in the update sheet is that we add brackets dated 20th of January 2025, close brackets, just to clarify what it is. And I'm happy to read out if there's anyone that hasn't got that in front of them, happy to read it out as well.
Yeah, I think everybody has seen the update sheet, so I don't think there's an issue there. Before we go any further with the proposal, there are some members that haven't spoken to this one, so could I please ask if you want to speak, please speak to the proposal now. Thank you. Okay, so I understand then that all members must be happy they have sufficient information to enable them to make an informed decision on this application. Am I correct? Seems to be assent around the chamber. Okay, to recap, we have a proposal from Councillor Weller, seconded by Councillor Shortell. All members have had the opportunity to speak on the proposal, so can I have a show of hands, all those in favour? That is unanimous to accept the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. Could you just clarify the wording, please, on this one, Matthew? Thank you.
Yep, so it's delegate authority to the head of planning and service manager for development management and enforcement to refuse the application for the reasons set out below. So this is the preface, subject to no comments or adverse comments that include material planning considerations being received from third parties by the 29th of January 2025. And that's due to the notification of the landowner, which is Dorset Council, because of the extension of the application area during the course of the application. And I won't read out the whole reason there.
Thank you for that. So members, sorry, we finished the vote. Councillor Bown now. I'm sorry? I'm not sure why you would need to ask a question, but just to be fair, I will ask you to please speak.
Sorry, I know we voted on the recommendation to refuse planning with regard to the flooding. I just wondered whether we needed to make a note whether we were unhappy with the access issues as set out by our colleague in Highways. No, fine.
I'm afraid it's too late for that, but I think the spirit has been made public on that one. Thank you. So if there's that means we now move to item 7 on the agenda, which is urgent items. And there are no urgent items. Item 8 is exempt business. There is no exempt business. So in that case, I declare this meeting closed at 11:57, and thank you all for your attendance.